What do you suppose Mahatma Gandhi, the great spiritual leader from India, was afraid of? 1, snakes. 2, what other people would think of him. And 3, that others might not want to be his friend. Those were Gandhi's fears as a little boy, as described in a children's biography that I've been reading with my daughter. Texas surely does not have as many snakes as the jungles of Gandhi's India, but I'll admit I've become more wary of them since we moved here. Twice as many poisonous snakes as Indiana, I think. The part of Gandhi's childhood story that spoke to my second grader, though, was the part about being afraid that someone might not want to be his friend. That rang true to her. If you have ever had an on-again, off-again friendship or had overtures of friendship rejected, you know the sting of longing to belong, but failing to connect. Nature can teach us about friendship and belonging. Robin Wall Kimmerer, a botanist and a member of the Potawatomi Native American nation, writes about scientists learning how groves of trees communicate. Some use pheromones in the air to warn of insect attacks so that other trees can produce chemicals to repel the pests. Pecans and other trees that synchronize the production of nuts or fruits may actually communicate underground through fungal strands that connect the roots of the trees into a vast network. The network helps the fungi find minerals in the soil and give them to the trees in exchange for carbohydrates that they need. They also appear to perform a Robin Hood function for the trees, redistributing carbon from those trees who have plenty to those who do not have enough. Their belonging goes deep, literally. Kimmerer and her Potawatomi people have been part of this network of reciprocity as well, protecting the pecan grove from harm and planting seeds to benefit the many parts of the ecosystem that depend on the trees, including the people who harvest the nuts. This belonging to the environment is tied up with restoring belonging as a people. Kimmerer writes, now, 2 generations later, after removal, after allotment, after the boarding schools, after diaspora, my family returns to Oklahoma, to what is left of my grandfather's allotment of land. From the hilltop, you can still see pecan groves along the river. At night, we dance on the old powwow grounds. The ancient ceremonies greet the sunrise. The smell of corn soup and the sound of drums fill the air as the 9 bands of the Potawatomi, scattered across the country by this history of removal, come together again for a few days each year in a search for belonging. The Western culture that ruptured the belonging of so many native peoples on this continent is more oriented toward the individual than the community. The rugged individualism which has thrived in the United States may seem normal to us, but in the wide span since prehistory, it is an aberration, even for the West. Celtic writer John O'Donohue observes where this individualistic turn in Western world has left us. In postmodern culture, he writes, there is a deep hunger to belong. It seems we are in the midst of a huge crisis of belonging. When the outer cultural shelters are in ruins, we need to explore and reawaken the depths of belonging in the human mind and soul. Finding communities of belonging, creating communities of belonging, this is important work in our time and place, not only for ourselves, but for the health of our society and for the health of the planet to which we belong. Our first and perhaps our most profound sense of belonging comes from our families. As mammals, we begin life experiencing ourselves as part of our mother. The baby is nurtured in her womb and is born belonging in her arms, at her breast. Gradually, the infant grasps that they are a separate person, different from their closest caregivers. Ironically, this process of developing our own identity occurs within the context of the groups to which we belong, starting with our family. We can't become ourselves all by ourselves. From the very start, we need others. It does, of course, make a difference how those formative groups support us. If we belong to a family or a community that accepts us as we are, we learn to accept ourselves. That self-acceptance, in turn, makes it possible for us to experience genuine belonging with other groups. The social work scholar Brené Brown offers this insight. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. I think she's saying that we have to get comfortable in our own skin in order to genuinely share of ourselves with others and thus be able to experience deep connection. There's a tension between these two forces, needing others and wanting to be true to ourselves. It does not always work out easily, but we can belong with others who recognize and value us for who we really are. It may take some work to find such groups. I did a bit of crowdsourcing for this reflection, inviting people I know to share stories of belonging. Among members of this church who responded, a running theme was finding the community they longed for here at Westside. If you are here because a friend invited you here today, chances are that they experienced the gift of belonging here, and they think you just might experience that too. But as I said during the welcome, this is merely an invitation to explore. Each person will sort out how it fits for them. Westside member Karen Moore shared how, by the tender age of 4, she felt a mismatch between her personal experience and ideas and what she was taught in Sunday school. She spent all of her childhood and much of her adulthood, she said, trying to fit into the religious culture of the Bible Belt society around her, but feeling like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. Karen explains, I cycled through many denominations, Baptist, Presbyterian, Disciples of Christ. I dated men from all different backgrounds, atheists, Mormons, Jehovah's Witness, Catholic. I never fit in anywhere when it came to thoughts I had on God and how religion should work in the world. But my soul still longed for a religious community where I could actually feel like I belonged. When she was about 50, Karen searched online. She came upon Westside and started listening to the posted reflections or sermons of the minister at the time. The first time I listened to him speak on the church website, she says, I began to cry. She listened to more reflections and cried harder. She writes, here were dozens of freethinkers like me, people who were curious and open to debate on a variety of issues that were dear to my heart, people who weren't afraid to ask hard questions about the world and able to consider many different answers, people I could argue with and come away enriched and empowered by their different thoughts and beliefs. As Karen got involved, she felt not only warmly welcomed, but she says, truly embraced for my authentic self. It was only then that she realized how much of a void there had been in her heart, how deeply she had needed a place to belong. My colleague Marcus Hartleaf offers a wonderful image of belonging and community. He tells of a congregation that made a mosaic together of a tree of life. Congregants of all ages came together, he says, to craft the tree's leaves using bits and pieces of broken ceramics, jewelry, glass, and stone, including many objects that were meaningful from members' personal lives. The Tree of Life mosaic image appeals to me not only as a symbol of diverse people belonging with one another, but also because it reflects the character of this particular tradition, Unitarian Universalism. As Hartley put it, Unitarian Universalists are mosaic makers. We are a people who bring together the broken pieces of our histories and the shining pieces of our seeking, and piece by piece, create a mosaic religion. Our tree of life is found in the stories of our living tradition. The bead from a transformational moment of worship at a youth conference. The bit of paper stamped with the blazing emblem of the Unitarian Service Committee that saved lives during World War II. The button or patch on a backpack that proudly proclaims the first justice issue that lit our souls on fire. But I think what I most appreciate about Hartleaf's mosaic metaphor is the less obvious lesson that he draws from it. He lifts up the importance of the grout. Grout, he says, the chalky, gritty stuff that is squeezed between the cracks of tiles. In a mosaic, the grout holds the image together, unifying disparate pieces into a whole. The grout of a community, Hartleaf writes, takes years to lay and settle. Grout happens in board meetings and committee meetings and endless emails and slow-moving institutions. It is in weekly potlucks shared by neighbors, a ride to church, and coffee in the social hall after worship. We help to make the grout, he observes, when we learn each other's names and when we reach out across generational divides. We help to make the grout when we show up on Sunday morning without having checked first to see if we're interested in the sermon topic. When a newborn arrives to be blessed by the community, it is the grout that enables us to welcome them. And it is in the grout, Hartleaf concludes, that we rest when we gather to grieve and memorialize a beloved one who has died. It all deepens our belonging. Our ongoing involvement and commitment to such a place can make our experience of this community more rich with each passing year. Wherever we find belonging, with our families and pets, in a circle of friends, and cultural traditions, and the natural beauty that surrounds us and unfolds us, we cannot escape our need for this connection. John O'Donohue points out, the word belonging holds together the two fundamental aspects of life, being and longing. The longing of our being and the being of our longing. Belonging. Belonging, O'Donohue notes, is the heart and warmth of intimacy. When we deny it, we grow cold and empty. Our life's journey is the task of refining our belonging so that it may become more true, loving, good, and free. The longing within us, he says, always draws us towards belonging and again towards new forms of belonging when we have outgrown the old ones. I think there's a connection between this point, the way we continue to find new forms of belonging throughout our lives, and the journey toward embracing who we are and living our life authentically. We seek places to belong where our whole self is embraced, where we can continue that journey of a genuine life. That's how Westside member Erin Hart found her way to this community. She was raised in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, attending the same Lutheran church from the age of 5. She told me, when I was 20, I came out to my family and friends as bisexual, though now I know I'm pansexual. I was in a same-sex relationship for 6 years before I married Mark, another member here at Westside. And during that time, I stopped going to the church because I felt judged by the members. After my ex and I split, I went back to the Lutheran church. One Sunday, during a congregational meeting, there was a vote on whether the congregation might ever call a gay pastor and whether they would sanctify holy unions. Both motions failed. I was heartbroken. I stood up, walked up to the front of the sanctuary, and came out to the entire congregation. I told them that what they were doing was wrong, especially if they believed that Jesus died for all people. I left that day and haven't been back. When she got home, Erin contacted her theology professor, ironically from Texas Lutheran University, and she asked for his advice. I told him what I believed, and he said I sounded like a Unitarian Universalist. When I went to Westside's webpage, my eyes were drawn to the rainbow chalice and the words, "We are a welcoming congregation." That means this congregation went through a deliberate process of education and formally voted to include GLBT people fully in all aspects of the community. Erin and Mark decided to visit Westside the next Sunday. That was the day I found my new church home, she says, a place I knew I could be my authentic self and be loved because of it, not in spite of it. In reflecting on why she needed to find a place like this to belong, Erin says, I think it's because I needed to find a religion that was as open-hearted as I am. A place that loves and welcomes and celebrates all people. Growing up in my childhood church, I never felt like one of the alls. Now at Westside, I am. And by the way, for those who found their way here from somewhere else as part of a search for where you belonged, certainly not everyone here, but a fairly high number, it can be helpful to sort through what you value and want to keep, as well as what you want to let go of from that previous part of your journey. That's why I will be facilitating a mini retreat in November called Integrating Your Religious Past. It'll provide some simple tools through which people may process past religious experience so they can live more fully in the present. And by the way, this can be as useful for longtime UUs as for those new to the tradition, because we keep on growing and sometimes changing in our journeys once we are here. If you're curious, there's more about that in the Westside Weekly. I too grew up in another tradition, and along the way came to question whether I belonged there. But the other place in which my family took sanctuary was one where I never doubted myself to be at home. Our vacations always involved camping, hiking, and picnics in the Church of Nature. Even when we were home, the primordial longing to belong could be sated with just a bit of contact with the outdoors. My dad would lay out a blanket in the backyard for my brother and me and settle his telescope on something of interest in the night sky so we could see a particular star or constellation. The starry sky awoke such a sense of wonder and connection for me. I had this feeling again last spring when my family visited Big Bend in West Texas. It was so dark at night that the Milky Way was palpable, almost throbbing with life. On the way back to our tent from brushing my teeth, I gazed up at the Milky Way and was swept up in the wonder and majesty of its cascade of lights. I felt myself to be profoundly at home in the universe, amid the stars dancing above, the black-green trees with their rustling leaves, and the insects rhythmically creaking. This is a sort of cosmic belonging that is available to all of us when we tune into it. Wherever it takes us, may we each honor our deep longing to belong. Let us continue to refine our belonging so that it may become more true, loving, good, and free, as John O'Donohue said. And whenever we find that we have outgrown the old forms of belonging, or simply hunger for a deeper connection, let us allow the longing within us to pull us toward those places in which we can joyfully belong now. May it be so. Amen.